Hi, let's take a look at how we can combine triggers and tasks to automate simple workflows. For my use case, I chose to build a system where students can enroll to classes. And as you can see, each class will have a class capacity. And right next to it, we're going to be able to see how many total students have enrolled in that specific class. This use case will have two different triggers, and each trigger will have two actions. The first trigger, what we're going to do is once a student enrolls into a class, we want to be able to add +1 to total enrolled. And the second action is to check once that class capacity has been filled, we want to change the status to closed, therefore nobody else can sign up for that specific class. So let me give you a live example. Let's go ahead and enroll one student into our geometry class. Say, for example, we go with Molly Baker. And you can see how we have 4 students enrolled into this class. Now, I don't want to submit that form 11 more times, so I'm going to submit it up here where the class capacity is 3. So let's see what happens if I sign up, let's say, Raj Smith. Now you can see how that class is no longer shown because we changed the status automatically because we reached that class capacity. Therefore, nobody else can sign up. And the second trigger that I have is on a separate report. So if I refresh this now, you're going to be able to see a few more signed up students. And we're tracking to see what students have signed up for each class. Now this trigger, once we delete a student from a class, I would like to go ahead and update the classes table to subtract 1 from the total count. And if you subtract 1 and you no longer have the count equals to capacity, now I want to change the status to once again be open so more students can sign up. So let's say we delete Raj and we go back to the previous report and we refresh. You can see how that class is opened up once again, and we can continue adding additional students. The last thing that we have on this use case is to check for the enrollment date. So I have a task running daily to check that if the class still falls below the deadline of the enrollment date, keep that class open. However, once you pass that enrollment date, change the status to closed or expired so that this way nobody else can sign up. Now let's go to Caspio and let me show you how you can set up these triggers and also the task to automate this system. For this use case, you'll need two different tables. One table that's going to store your classes and the other table that's going to store all the student information. So let's take a look at the classes table first. You'll notice that I have my class ID. I set that to a random ID to uniquely identify each class. Then we have class name, class description, class capacity and count, which are both set as a number data type, because when we build that trigger, we're going to be checking the class count against capacity. I also have class status, and we have the enrollment deadline, which is set to a date and time. Once you save your table, I recommend that you open the table and then add some sample data so that later on you can have some information to test with. Let's go back out to the tables menu. Now let's take a look at the enrolled students table. And in this table, we have a few fields. We have the student ID, which is also a random ID. I have my class ID, which we're going to be stamping from the parent table of classes. So this way we can track what student has signed up for what class. And finally, we have student name. Of course, you're welcome to add other attributes to this table. It's completely up to you. I chose to keep the table to a few fields for simplicity of the use case. But again, as I said, add as many fields as you need to for your own purpose and needs. The next thing that you may want to do is go back out to the tables menu and click on the relationships link. And I recommend that you join these two tables using the class ID. And another thing that I recommend that you do is to select class name from the dropdown and have that be displayed on the data page as well. Because when you look at the report of all the students that have enrolled into classes, you want to be able to display the class name as well on that report instead of the class ID. Next, let's take a look at our data pages. We have a total of 3 data pages, one that's showing all the open classes. So this report is being filtered based on the status equals to open. And if the class is open, you're going to be able to click on the enroll link. And when you click on that link, it's going to take you to the enrollment form to sign up a new student. And we also have a report. This report can be used for an admin level user to manage students. So if you want to remove a student from a specific class, you can delete them. Let's go to tables now and let me show you how you can set up these triggers. The triggers are going to be set up on the enrolled students table. This is going to be the action table. So as you add information to this table or remove information from this table, you want to be able to update the classes table. So let's click on more, click on triggered actions. Let's set up our first trigger. And as I said before, each trigger will have two separate actions. The first action is going to happen on insert of data. So as you insert data to the enrolled students table, I would like to use the action called update. And what I would like to do is update that count field. So if I add a student, I want to add a +1 to the count inside the classes table. But before I can do that, I need to join these two tables together. So using the gear icon, you can select join to combine tables together using common fields. And in this case, that's going to happen on the inserted table. So the inserted table is basically the students enrolled table, which also has the class ID, if you recall. And all we want to do is join these two tables using the class ID field from the inserted table and also the classes table. And when you do that, you're going to have access to all the fields from the classes table. So what you want to do here is set your field to class count. That is a number data type, as you can see. Then click on number and then select this widget and snap that in place. And you want to select your field class count. So using the data, select field, drop that in place, and simply just say select class count. And you want that to be +1. But it's only going to add a +1 if you set the correct where clause, which in our case, it's going to have to say class capacity is greater than the class count. So if the class capacity is greater than, and one more data element for field, and it's greater than class count. Let me remove this. Now what it's basically saying that if the class capacity inside the classes table is greater than the class count, go ahead and add +1 to the class count in the classes table. And the second action that we want to do is simply change the status to full if class count equals to class capacity. And that's very easy. Just select your other action to update, snap that in place. Again, it's going to be the classes table, and you want the status to equal to full if the class capacity equals to, and then one more field element, and you want that to equal to class count. Let me remove this. And that's all you have to do. Basically now, if class count equals class capacity, change the status to full. Let's save the trigger, and we're going to call this count +1 and status change. Save and enable. And let's test this out. Refresh, and let's go ahead and enroll a student. Let's go with Joy Spring. And right away, you can see how we added a +1 to this table and also to this report. You can also refresh the table to see what that looks like. Let's do a right click, open the table of classes, and you can see 1. Let's add one more student, Mary Springs. Okay, so now we have 2. If you refresh the classes table, you're going to be able to see that increment of 1. Let's add one more so that you can see the status change. Bob Smith. And now you can see that class is no longer showing up because we changed the status to full. And this report is filtering classes that equal to open. So if we go to our classes table and click on refresh, you will now see 3 and you will see full. Now let's set up our second trigger that as you remove students, you want to revert back to open and have less in the class count if you subtract 1 student or 2 or 3 students. So back to triggered actions. And instead of setting up a new trigger from scratch, you can actually make a copy of the existing one. And let's just rename this subtract 1 and status change. Let's click on save. Let's edit. And for this trigger, you want to actually run this action on delete, not on insert, because when you delete a student from this table, you want to update the classes table. And this time we're not adding +1, we're actually subtracting 1. Then you want to set your where clause if the class capacity is greater than or equal to class count. You want to be able to subtract 1. And finally, you also want to update your class status to equal to open if the class capacity is greater than class count. So let's go ahead and save this trigger. enable it. And now let's go ahead and test this out. Let's go to Manage Students. Let's refresh. These are the 3 students that are enrolled into the class. And if I click on Delete, click OK, the student has been deleted. And now we should once again be able to see that class with the total count of 2. And if you go to your table of classes, this should update to 2 out of 3, and it should go back to open. And it does. So 2 simple triggers with 2 actions per trigger that allow us to add students and be able to manage the class capacity and the class count and also the status. The last thing that we're going to learn in this video is how to set up a task to change the status of the class to something else if we surpass the enrollment date. So set up a brand new task, and you want to actually configure this task to run daily, because you want to check that enrollment date daily to see if you need to take action. So click on Apply. For my action, I want to use Update. I want to be able to update the classes table and change the class status to maybe expired, where the enrollment date, or deadline in this case, is less than the timestamp. So go to Date, include the timestamp, and it's going to default to your account's time zone. So if you have it set to Pacific or any other time zone, it's automatically going to detect that and default to that. And believe it or not, that's all you really have to do. And all the task is doing is running daily, and all it's doing is checking to see if the enrollment deadline is less than the time zone, which is basically today's date. It's going to change the status to expired. So in my use case, if we look at all the open classes, if today was 11:30, then it's going to change the status to expired, and you're no longer going to be able to see this class. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll be able to apply some triggers to your own applications. It's a really effective way of automating many workflows. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe. And also, if you have any questions, use the comment section below. For additional videos and articles, keep it right here on our YouTube channel, or check out our knowledge base at howto.caspio.com.